Jason Spangler. I think most of you know me or have seen me around camp. What you might not know is I'm actually a member of the ISCA Board of Directors. ISCA stands for International Scout Collectors Association. So one of my jobs is sort of being on that board is to go out and try to educate scouts and scouters about patch collecting and making that knowledge that something would make you interested in doing patch trading. So I've got three things I really want to talk to you today about. The first is why patch collecting. Just kind of go through that. The second is what to collect. And then the third is talking about some resources and things like that, equipment and bags and all the little things that we like to buy to go with our patch collecting hobby. Why patch collecting? How many of you in here collect baseball cards? How many of you collect something like football cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards, or I don't even know all the names of those cards they have now. Okay, I see a few hands that go up. Now, I also collected baseball cards when I was your age, and I remember about 1990, just to date myself a little bit, I went out to the gas station. They used to sell the baseball cards at the gas station. I spent a lot of money buying cards. I remember one time I thought I was pretty clever, so I saved up a lot of money, and I bought an entire box. The woman hadn't even opened the box yet. I got all of them. And I had all these baseball cards, and that was great. See, there's one thing about baseball cards. I've never really met any of the people that are on those teams. I got a lot of cards for teams that I didn't really even care about. I was mostly an Atlanta Braves fan. So these cards, after a while, they really just didn't mean anything to me. They were kind of cool, and I understood, Topps and Donruss and all these companies had printed these cards up, but they really just didn't mean a whole lot to me. On the other hand, what I want you to think about is that patches that are made for Boy Scout events really do have a meaning. I'm going to give you an example of somebody that you all saw here today. How many of you saw the guy walking around this afternoon who had the really old Santee Lodge flap on his shirt? Anybody see that guy who was wearing a backboard? He's actually left now, so I'm going to talk about him while he's gone. But this guy worked on camp coach staff in the 70s. He went to Dixie, he danced at Dixie, and he has not set foot on this camp in about 35 years. He has not been here, okay? 35 years. But do you know when he came back and walked into this dining hall and walked around this camp and saw those patches hanging up on those frames, all these memories came flooding back to him. Ray Williams and I were there standing talking to him, looking at that frame, and he saw the 1975 Dixie patch, and he said, I danced at that Dixie. I remember dancing at that Dixie. We walked down to the trading post, and we were walking around looking at stuff, and all these memories came flooding back. That's what I think makes collecting Boy Scout patches and Boy Scout memorabilia special, is that we all have a connection with these patches. Maybe time has gone by, 35 years in his case, but all these patches kind of meant something to him. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but I do want to mention this because I think it's a really cool story, if you don't mind, Chris.
Go ahead.
He was wearing a Santee Lodge flap, what we call the F1 flap, on his shirt in a little plastic holder. But underneath that, he had another flap, and it was actually a Spread W Brotherhood flap from the 1970s. And he had this little plastic holder, and he did something that was really cool. And I'm telling this story to sort of say, hey, pass it on. To all you adults out there, pass it on, He saw Chris get up and talk, Chris being the lodge chief. He went up to Chris in private and said, Chris, I'd like you to have this. He didn't give him the black twill. He gave him the S3 Spread W flap from the 1970s. A really cool Santee Lodge patch. Just gave it to him because Chris is lodge chief, and I thought it was really cool. So pass it on, adults. If you can do something to help the youth, then make sure you do that. I think that all of the people in this class today can fit into three different groups: accumulators, collectors, and patch traders. And let me tell you who the accumulators are. The accumulators are those scouts and scouters who are very active. They go to a lot of things, and they get that one patch that gets issued to them. If you're lucky, like Halloween, whenever they have the program, if they don't run out of patches, right? You get that one patch that you earned, and that goes in a drawer, and you've got it. That's the patch that you earned, and you are an accumulator. All of us probably have a little bit of that going on. For those of us who are accumulators, this is an example of something I brought I wanted to show you, because I want to encourage you. Some scouts don't do this, but I really want to encourage you. All of the patches that you earn for going to things, don't trade those away. Don't sell those or keep those somewhere special. I had a big bag of patches that I kept in my room for a long time, all the things that I'd gone to. And finally, about 10 or 15 years ago, I was living at home with my parents right after college, and I somehow convinced my mother that we should sew all these patches on a blanket. And boy, she was up, because this took days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks. So what I did was I took all the patches that I'd earned for events that I'd gone to, I pinned them on this blanket, and they're kind of in order. They start right here in 1981 when I was a Cub Scout and I went to the expo in Florence. And we sewed all these on a blanket all the way around and around. Now this blanket is, it's current all the way up to about 2006. So I need to do a little catching up. I got some sewing to do myself. So anyways, this is, I didn't really want to make this the whole point of the class, but if you are an accumulator, then this is you. One of everything that you've gone to, you're sort of an accumulator. Another type of person, maybe this is you, is sort of a collector. They actually want to get things that they didn't go to. How many of you like going after patches for things that you didn't go to? All right, you are a collector. That's a big leap from an accumulator to a collector. A lot of people in Santee Lodge are accumulators. They go to that lodge store, they buy their one patch, they maybe buy one flap, it goes in a box and never to be seen again. But some of you will go and you'll actually buy an extra patch. And then you'll take that extra patch, or maybe you're trying to go back and get patches that you didn't have from before. And then the last group I think is patch traders. And that's what I want to kind of encourage some of you to become. Patch trader is somebody who's got enough confidence to actually go out, sit down with another scout or scouter, and actually just trade patches with them. And we're going to kind of talk about what you would collect and how you would do that in just a few minutes. So those are sort of the three types of people that we have. I hear a lot of people say about patch trading, I don't want to do that because I'm going to get ripped off. We all have sort of this feeling of we don't want to be ripped off by somebody. And sometimes that's a big hang-up for people about trading patches because they think, oh, this guy's going to rip me off. So hopefully after going through this class, you'll feel a little more comfortable about that. There's some kind of things that you can... Okay, I want to transition now to talking now about what to collect. And as I do this, I'm going to make this a little more autobiographical. I'm going to talk about myself a little bit because my career was being a history teacher, and I always felt like if you were in a class and the teacher could give you stories and kind of tell you stories, that always made it a little more enjoyable, and I could kind of identify with that. So I'm going to tell you some stories about myself, kind of how did I get started with this, and also talk about what to collect. I was inducted into Santee Lodge when I was 13 years old. Anybody in here 13 years old? Close enough? You are? Well, when I was 13 years old, I got inducted in Santee Lodge. We were staying in Elk Campsite, and it was ISWA chapter. Anybody in ISWA? Okay? ISWA chapter. It just so happened that everybody in my campsite was a patch collector. We were all 13, 14 years old. Between us, we might have had 20 patches. But in that campsite that week, it was OA week, those 20 patches got traded back and forth between all of us probably a dozen times. I mean, your whole patch collection could fit in your hand, but we were trading patches at night. It's just one of those things that happen. So as far as what to collect, probably the first thing that all of us do is we collect something very local. For me, growing up in Santee Lodge, that meant that I wanted to collect Santee Lodge fellowship patches. That was probably my first collection. And then eventually it got into collecting Santee Lodge flaps. For a lot of you who are just starting out, I'm guessing that your collection probably looks like that. It has a lot of fellowship patches and maybe some flaps as well. In the Lodge Trading Post, for example, they probably have the last 2 or 3 years worth of Lodge fellowship patches still for sale, maybe $3 a piece. So if you don't have some things, maybe that might be a place for you to go and look at. For me, I eventually kind of branched out. I loved Camp Coker, worked on Camp Coker staff, so I started collecting Camp Coker patches. Loved PD Area Council, started collecting council strips. And I just kept going, kept going, kept going. We got a council strip guy here. I kept going, until eventually I just collected anything that's had to do with PD Area Council. I got a little crazy. I was collecting t-shirts, I collected jackets, I collected hats. Got a little crazy. So eventually there did come a point where I had to cut back, sort of like an addict. I had to cut back and go on a 12-step program. And I quit the hats, I quit the t-shirts, I quit the jackets and all that. Just kind of got crazy. But I still to this day collect any kind of patch or neckerchief that says PD Area Council, Santee Lodge, Camp Coker. I'll give you an example. In my pocket I've got 3 patches that I bought in the Trading Post today. One's a Covery patch, this one's Cub Day Camp. I didn't go to these events, but I have a collection of any event patch from PD Area Council, especially if it's out of Camp Coker. That's something that I like to get. So in terms of thinking about what to collect, that's probably the first place a lot of us would start. Collect locally. Collect your camp, collect your council, collect maybe your district. For me, I used to collect these Scout Expo patches back when we used to have a Scout Expo every year. That was something I was really interested in. How many of you have been to a Dixie or a National Jamboree or maybe a NOAC? Anybody been to a Dixie, National Jamboree, or NOAC? Okay, great. The reason why I mention that is because if you were like me when you're 13, 14, 15 years old and you're hardcore looking for those parakeets, if it doesn't have a parakeet on a red arrow, you don't want it. That's all you care about. You're going to have a hard time when you go to National Scout Jamboree and you try to trade patches. Kyle, have you ever had this experience? You're at the National Scout Jamboree, you walk up and down Thomas Road for miles and miles looking for parakeets on red sticks. How many do you see?
Like 97, the troop outside of the contingent that went, there was 2 Santee flaps seen outside of our contingent.
That's a great example. The entire troop of people, only twice did they see a Santee patch laying on the side of the road trading patches. So again, I'm telling you my story. In 1989, I went to the National Scout Jamboree. This is the little patch I have on my shirt here. I was like, by that point maybe I was 16 years old, maybe. Went to the Jamboree, walked all over looking for Santee patches, and that's all I cared about. Couldn't find them. So I had to sort of, adjust, what am I going to do? So I just picked something. I picked wolves. Why wolves? I don't know. But I found some patches that had wolves on them, and I thought they were pretty cool. So I started walking up and down the road, trading for any OA patch that had a wolf on it, because I like wolves. Well, I found out later that one of my favorite lodges, which is Pellissippi 230, I thought that was a wolf on their flat, but actually it's a silver fox. So that kind of shot a hole in my collection. But anyways, I was looking for wolf patches. So if you go to a Jamboree, you go to a NOAC, you go to something like that, one thing you can collect is you can pick something you're looking for. For me, I picked wolves, okay? I knew a guy named Harrison Penn, kind of as a fun thing. He went to a NOAC in '94. He collected patches with gold mylar borders. Why? I don't know. Just anything that had a gold mylar border. He wanted it. Another friend of mine, Colin Crick, collected anything with E. Urner Goodman on it. You wouldn't think there's a lot of patches with E. Urner Goodman on it, but actually a lot of lodges have done that. We even have one patch we did, I think, for a winter banquet that has E. Urner Goodman's face on it. So any patch with E. Urner Goodman on it, he was after that. If you're an adult, I know a lot of adults have collected their wood badge totems. I can remember one patch auction we had here in the dining hall. Dave Olds, who's now deceased, and David Lee were both wood badge foxes, and they both got into a crazy bidding war over a Muskogee Lodge jacket patch that had a beautiful red fox on it. So you just kind of have to decide, what is it you're going to collect? In 1993, I went back to the Jamboree. I was over my wolf phase. In fact, I think most of those wolf patches were gone and traded and disappeared. All of a sudden, I came across a couple of patches from a lodge in Virginia, Kickotan Lodge 463. I think I might have some later on here in one of these bags. The thing about this lodge flap that struck me, the reason why I really, really liked it was it had a Confederate flag on it. And about that time, there was quite a bit of controversy going on about having a Confederate flag on Boy Scout patches. There weren't that many during this time period that had Confederate flags on them. So I decided, I'm going to look for those. So I walked up and down Thomas Road again, looking, and tried to trade for any Confederate flag patch I could find. Turns out they actually had some patches from a long time ago, back like, now we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. Well, during the 100th anniversary would have been in the 1960s. There actually were a lot of Boy Scout patches made with Confederate flags. So since then I've gone and collected a few of those. So this collection I actually haven't traded off, I've kept onto it. But it's a collection I made of Boy Scout patches that have the Confederate flag on it. Not that I'm a raving member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans and I have a Confederate flag on my bumper sticker, but I just thought, hey, that's a cool thing to collect, I'm going to do it. So there you go. In 1997, I went to the National Jamboree again. You can tell this Jamboree thing, I keep going to that. And I had a book. Now, I was only there for one day. I was only going to be at the Jamboree for one day. Some friends and I were traveling. We stopped through there. I had a stack of flaps I was going to trade. And so I got a hold of this book. This is called the Pocket Blue Book. And I decided, I picked something very random. I decided I was going to collect lodges 1 through 100. Very random. So I went through my book here, and this is the actual book I carried around. And I went up and down the road looking for any lodge flaps from lodges 1 through 100. And when I got them, I checked off that box. And I came home with about 50 flaps that were from lodges 1 through 100 during that time. Now the only problem with collecting lodges 1 through 100 is, on some of these numbers, there's actually been several lodges that have been that number. And so that gets kind of tricky. There's some numbers that got reused over and over and over again. And so like for Lodge 55, there's 2 different Lodge 55s. For Lodge 47, there's 2 different 47s. For 46, there's 2 different 46. So it kind of took me a long time to do that. I will tell you that I have actually kept this collection up over the years. I didn't bring all this stuff to show you. One day maybe I'll do that. But I have a pretty good collection of Lodge flaps. I kept going past 100. I've got all the way up to whatever, 500, 600, whatever it is. 614 is the highest number. And I've tried to upgrade those because I really like old looking flaps. So I tried to upgrade them to the older style Swiss embroidered flaps. So that's kind of what I decided to do. All right, almost time for a door prize. Get ready. In 1998, a little company called eBay was invented, and that sort of changed the hobby of patch collecting and patch trading. Up until this time, I'd go to a Boy Scout event, I'd get all these patches, and I'd just keep them or trade them or whatever. But when eBay came on the scene, people started using that. Then you could trade, buy, and sell patches all the time. You could be at work when you're supposed to be teaching school, and you could be like during your playing period, you could be checking eBay like I used to do, and you could be buying and selling patches. And so from that time, whenever I've gone to these big events, I haven't really so much focused on collecting rebel flags or anything. I just sort of traded for anything, knowing that when I came home, anything I didn't want, I could just put it on eBay and sell it, and I could just have that money go buy some more patches. Just kind of keep feeding the engine. But one thing I have done is I've always tried to keep 1 or 2 patches from every event that I went to, just as kind of mementos. Like this patch is from a lodge, I think in Tennessee or Alabama, I forget which one. But it's just a really cool looking flag, so I held on to that one. These were from Alaska, which was kind of cool. They had fringe on, kind of cool. I went to the Jamboree the other year. This is the only patch from the 2005 Jamboree that I kept, but it's a really cool jacket patch. So, in terms of what to collect, kind of the rule of thumb is you can really just collect whatever interests you. But honestly, guys, if you're going to be a patch trader, you have to decide on something. You can't just show up and just trade for anything, because when you get back home, you're going to have a bunch of anything. You're not going to have any kind of a set or a checklist or a goal that you're working towards. Now, we have had some people in our lodge who've collected things like axes. A guy named Julian Fowler collected axes. We've had people who collected knives. We've had people who collected merit badges. Y'all know Joel Richardson. He really likes merit badges, merit badge sashes. So you don't just have to collect OA flags. It just so happens that when I was 13 years old and I was in Elk Campsite, that's all anybody cared about in Elk Campsite was Santee Lodge patches. So that's all I ever really cared about through this time. But you can collect whatever you want. Okay, what I'd like to do now then is move into talking about, so what are some sort of rules of how to trade? I talked about, I want to try to make more people trade, make them feel comfortable with that. So a couple simple rules that you can kind of try to remember. One is buy extras, okay? If you want to trade patches, there's one thing you need to have, some ammunition. Because you do not want to trade those patches of things that you went to. Remember that you went to that event, you got your one patch, that's the one you're supposed to keep and put behind and keep in that bag. You're not supposed to trade that. So if you want to trade patches, you need to buy some extras. Go down to the lodge store today, chances are they're going to have leftover patches from the last couple of events. They might even have some lodge flaps from Dixie or maybe from NOAC, or I think they have Indian Summer actually. And you can buy those for $3, whatever. It's pretty cheap. I realize that if you're a 13-year-old scout, you may not have a lot of money. That may seem like something's out of reach for you. But I will tell you that eventually, get to about 14 or 15, you can start doing some odd jobs. I used to bag groceries, and I can tell you that almost every dollar I made from bagging groceries either was spent on comic books or Boy Scout patches. Those are the 2 things I was passionate about. I didn't buy tennis shoes and other clothes and stuff that people were all into at my age. I was into comic books and Boy Scout patches. So, you can get that extra money, but when you come to an event like this, you need to bring that money and buy some extra patches so you've got something to trade. Along those lines, when you guys sign up to go to Dixie Fellowship, trading at Dixie Fellowship is great. there's one thing that everybody's going to want at Dixie Fellowship. Your patch from that weekend. They are going to want the Santee Lodge patch for that weekend. And lately we've been making lodge flaps for the Dixie. So make sure on the order form you can buy them. They're usually $3 a piece. You can order 10 extra if you have that much money sitting around. Order you some extra patches and bring those with you to trade, because they're going to trade really, really well. Okay, so always try to get extra patches. Another thing about trading patches is you have to know what you want. You got to educate yourself, decide what your focus is going to be, and know what that is. It's easy for me when I go to, like I went to Indian Summer this past summer. I just went and traded for anything that said Indian Summer. I traded for it because I knew people who wanted that stuff. That was pretty easy for me. But if you go to an event like Kyle was there and some of the guys were in Indian Summer, maybe you had to kind of decide what is it I really want, because I don't want to collect just patches from California or Tennessee or New York. I want to focus on something. So you need to have that focus when you come to an event. Sometimes it can be, looking for patches that have rebel flags on them or wolves or whatever. Whatever that little niche that you're going to go after, try to have that focus. If you're just getting started, I really encourage you to window shop. Walk around. Just sit. Ask if you can sit next to somebody. Myself, or Terry Skipper, who's done a lot of patch trading, or just anybody who's can be sort of a mentor for you. Ask if you can sit down and just sort of watch them. I can promise you that just about every adult that does patch collecting, one of their passions is they want to try to pass this hobby on to other people, sort of like I'm attempting to do today. And we would love to have you learn, sort of the tricks of the trade, what would be a good trade, what wouldn't be a good trade. But you just kind of have to educate yourself. So make an offer. Make an offer. This is one of the things people talk about patch trading. There's actually some really important skills that you're learning here, negotiating and making offers, things like that. Donald Trump, if you think about him, how did he become successful? I'm sure that's not a person I would want to negotiate with on a patch trade, right? Because he sort of has that poker face and looks mean, and I'm sure that I would just give him whatever he wanted. So, when you sit down with someone, just make an offer. You know what you have to trade. You know what your traders are. You know what they have that you want, so just make them an offer. One thing you need to remember about that, though, is you can always phone a friend. What's that from? The old Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? You can always, always, always ask the advice of another scout or collector. Do they think this is a fair trade? If you're just starting out, I really encourage you to do that, because that will, again, I want to demystify this. I don't want to make you feel like, oh, I can't trade patches because I'm going to get ripped off. No, just, ask someone else, is this a good trade? And they'll tell you. They will tell you if it's a good trade. When you do finally phone a friend and your friend says it's a good deal and you're going to make the trade with the other guy, we always close the trade with a handshake. Give them the scout handshake. That's sort of you're an honest man. You got to shake on it. I do want to tell you that as a rule of thumb, shaking on it, it's not like in the Dukes of Hazzard where they used to have this, I don't even know what they called it, moonshiner shake, where Boss Hog, they would spit on their hand. And when they shook, that was like that deal could never be broken. Like on their honor as a moonshiner, they could never break that. It doesn't work that way in patch collecting. You shake hands out of, scout is friendly, that sort of thing. But if someone comes back later and says, I thought about it and I really don't think that was a good deal, I want to get my patches back, then the sort of rule of etiquette is that you undo the trade. So we shake hands as a sign of friendship. We don't shake hands to seal the deal, and then you get to go run, but I got it. Whatever like that. Terry?
If it doesn't feel right, walk away. You can always come back. But if it don't feel right there at that moment, walk away. Because more likely it's probably not.
Went to a class the other day. Guy was talking about buying real estate investing, and he said something I think was very exactly what you're saying. He said, some famous guy said this. I didn't make this up. The deal of the decade will come again tomorrow. Sometimes you might think that deal that's laying there right on that table right now is just the deal of the decade. If I don't take it, I'll never get that patch. This is my only chance. I'll never get it. Sure enough, tomorrow, the next day, the next month, next year, you're going to have a chance to get that same thing, and it might be a lot easier, a lot less painless to do that. So yeah, you can always walk away. You've got to keep your patches safe. Now, a scout lives by a scout law, but that doesn't mean that all scouts that come to scouting events live by that scout law. Sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes you leave your stuff sitting in your campsite, in the bathroom, and somewhere else, and it just gets gone. But there have been people, even at Indian Summer, who had their stuff stolen. So you've got to be careful with your stuff. I've had, not recently, but a long time ago, there were some episodes at Camp Coker. Guys going in tents at fellowships and patches got missing. So when you think about it, these patches do have a value to some people, and you do need to kind of be careful about it.